Over the past 8 months, I've really had time to sink myself into Alan Wake 2. I've not stepped away from it just yet. When Final Draft released in December, I decided to try my hand at journaling my time throughout the game for the first time. With so much packed into this magnificent sequel, this gave me a greater appreciation of the game. Now, I want to share some of my thoughts and questions I have after finishing Final Draft before I release myself into the wild and see what other fans have theorized. As I've been trapped in my own personal writer's room, I'm expecting there to be conclusions that you could completely disagree with. I'm not fully certain of some things, and it's possible that I misread some situations. But I hope there are some things that make you stop and think if you haven't already considered them since the game launched so many months ago. This video will include spoilers up to and including the end of Final Draft, so please do not continue watching at any cost if you haven't experienced this game for yourself yet. Alan Wake 2 deserves to be experienced without any spoilers. We begin with the ending, just to get this out of the way. I had some confusion in my first run, but I think that writing this all down at the end of my Final Draft run helped clear some things up for me. After the summoning, Saga gets thrown into Cauldron Lake where she is trapped into her mind place. Avoiding a fate of becoming taken, she escapes. I immediately saw Night Springs in this shot. Stars appear in the memorable intro to each episode of Night Springs. Why does the exit to Saga's mind place look like the intro to a Night Springs episode? Saga gets the clicker from the shoebox.
There's the shoebox. The clicker. And some kind of bullet. Shining light. How did the clicker get here from Washington?
The last we saw of it was when Scratch Casey dropped it after triggering the DFS ending. In that scene, we saw Alice's photos of the clicker being caught in a hand. How did that work? In the dark place, which still looks like New York for Saga, she sees the old gods of Asgard before she leaves the dark place through the fountain. Artie mopped the floor of the writer's room so that Saga could get there.
I have put everything ready for the visitors. I'll come to wash the floor of your room next. All you need is water and Vileda. Water is the oldest bulb. Water finds its way. What water brings, it takes away. It can be clean or dirty. It can keep life or drown it.
Ahti.
After the summoning, Alan enters the Eternal DFS. He also said that Scratch brought the Dark Place to Bright Falls, which threw me off.
I brought Saga Anderson into this story to help me escape. She succeeded. It cost her everything. I'd used Alex Casey in my writing for years. The real Casey had been drawn here because of that. Now he was a victim too. Saga, Casey, Alice, all this horror originates from me. It's my fault. Scratch had to be stopped. I've driven down this road before. Been driving on it forever. If Scratch had brought the Dark Place here, this would take me back inside. In 2010, I dived in, a leap of faith for Alice, with no idea that the cost would be a nightmare worse than death. It had taken me 13 years to get out. Now Alice was dead, because of me. And I was going to make that leap again, this time knowing the cost all too well. Another way to look at it, I had brought the Dark Place here with me. I never had gotten out. Maybe after this I finally could. It was a fool's hope. I had no choice. I had to do it. That didn't make me any less terrified. Fuck it. expected.
On trying to leave, we as the player are hit with the fog that turns us around, just like there was in the dark place. Alan cannot escape. After grabbing the copy of Return, Alan sees the windows of the writer's room in a photo on the back cover, so he heads to Valhalla Nursing Home. Entering the wellness center, Alan sees visions of Alice. Up to this point, Alan has only seen visions of Alice in the dark place. Scratch Casey chases him, and Rose opens the door to the manor for him. At this point, I had seen things that indicated that Alan was in the dark place. Alan's line about the dark place in Bright Falls, the fog, the visions of Alice. If this is the dark place overlapping on our world, why isn't Rose affected by the Eternal DFS? My first thought would be the light, but it was daylight in the main street of Bright Falls. If Rose is out of range of the DFS area, an area that we have been told will keep growing, then this isn't the dark place. If this isn't the dark place, how did Alan escape again? That led me to believe that by this point Valhalla Nursing Home is within the growing area affected by the Eternal DFS. Inside the Valhalla Nursing Home, Alan meets Artie, who unlocks the door with a spiral on it. Alan enters the writer's room and sees an echo of himself talking to Saga. Echoes have only been experienced in the dark place. Alan starts writing the extended ending to Return. Later, Scratch Casey enters the writer's room. The dark presence returns to Alan's body. Saga shoots Scratch, but what exactly is the bullet of light? Why does Alice have a photo of this? What's the origin of this? Is this an idea she had? With the death of the writer, Saga has cell service, so she truly is no longer in the dark place. Alan wakes up and restarts the loop that isn't a loop in the base game, but wakes up with Saga and Casey there in the final draft. The final state of final draft has Saga in Washington's writer's room for cell service, and Alan there too as his escape from the dark place. What am I rambling about? My understanding is that Alan reaches the writer's room and Saga joins him through the fountain, with the writer's room placed in the attic of the Valhalla Nursing Home, but within the area affected by the Eternal DFS. The end of the Eternal DFS removes the dark place's overlap on our world and means that the writer's room is no longer in an area affected by the dark place. Alan, Saga, Casey, they're all in Washington.
You see, Initiation tells the story of a fictional writer named Alan Wake, who is trapped in a nightmare, desperately trying to find the manuscript of a novel he has forgotten he has written. The book is set in New York, but it might not be New York at all. He is tormented by his dark doppelganger and guided by visions of a fictional detective he has written. That's right, Alex Casey is in this book as well.
I guess we'll just keep doing this the whole show. The joke's on me.
But isn't that what you sign up for with autofiction? No, but seriously, I found the structure of the reality you build in the book fascinating. It reminded me of The Matrix. I mean, the writer is physically in his writer's room, trapped there, and he projects himself out to this dark dream of New York through the story he is writing. Like astral projection. Did I get that right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Go on. I should be taking notes here. This is great stuff.
And making notes is what I did. We see that the writer's room is different between the writer of Initiation and the projected Allens. Parliament Tower becomes visible after the overlaps, so I think these are different writer's rooms, so that it's not as simple as these rooms being later in a timeline. Tim shines a light on what might be happening here.
This place, it's like trying to find your way around in a dream. I've been trying to map it, but it keeps looping, shifting. Like there were many versions stacked on top of each other.
I think the writer's rooms are stacked on top of each other. Alan accesses a different layer when Parliament Tower becomes visible. Relating this to quantum mechanics, because I want to, multiple states can exist in a state of superposition. Observing a state collapses the wave function to that of a single state, and I guess you could call that a, quantum break. Alright, so we know that Alan projects himself out from the writer's room. Let's number the projections of Alan by the loop that we see them in.
The story had brought me here, brought me nowhere. Looped me back. I was writing the story. And in the story, I now stepped into the writer's room. But there was no one here writing.
Alan 1 sees Return's title page, with the author's name scratched out. He sees the corpse of Alan 2 at the desk, with a bullet through his head. The Dark Presence enters Alan 1. The writer of Initiation is shocked out of his seat back in the writer's room, and for the first time he keeps his memories. Why? The story is a spiral. Alan Wake needs to keep his memories to write about Alan 1 finding the dead body of Alan 2, who is shot by Alan 3. What we just saw was Alan 1 walking into the end state of Initiation after Alan 3 was summoned. The rest of the story needs to be written so that what we just saw can happen, so that it can be written, so that it can happen. Alan Wake writes what he thinks is a new draft of Initiation, which turns out to be a continuation of Initiation. Alan 2 reaches to his head at the start of this draft. Why? I'm hesitant to say that it's because he remembers, because Alan 1 didn't remember anything, and Alan 1 also touched his head at the start of his projection. Part of me thought that it would be down to the Dark Presence. RT said that water is the memory of the world, and I assumed that the previous attempt before we play Initiation would also have ended with the Dark Presence attacking Alan. Jumping ahead to the writer's room, we see the completed manuscript of Return. Alan 2 edits Return, scratching out the typed words, including the author's name. The original manuscript didn't involve Saga. Any lines involving Saga were written by Alan 2.
I needed someone in the story to fight the darkness. Saga Anderson. I kept seeing her in my visions. She was already in Bright Falls, already involved, but she was not in Return. Not yet. I'd write her in. Try to stop Scratch within the limits of the horror story. It was almost impossible. It was taking too long. I had not reached the end.
Before Alan 2 can complete his edit, Alan 3 shoots him in the head. The writer of Initiation is again shocked out of his seat. He continues Initiation through a new draft to send his projection to the other writer's room. Alan 3 has wet hair and the environment is flooded. He believes that Alan 2 is Scratch, still in the writer's room. He kills Alan 2 before quickly realizing that he killed himself. This leads him to believe that he was the one haunting Alice. This felt like a leap as I played it, but I think this is down to him having seen Alice's photos, which he connects to his recent actions. This is the man who sacrificed himself to the dark place to save Alice and has been trapped there for what feels like lifetimes, so he immediately gives up, allowing the Dark Presence to possess his body, forming Scratch.
This is the ritual to lead you on. Your friends will meet him when you're gone.
He is then summoned by Saga to Cauldron Lake. And that's Initiation from Alan's perspective. In chronological order, Return is written before we play as any of the 3 projected Alans in the other writer's room. We only see Alan 2 scratch out the original manuscript of Return. Immediately after Alan 2 is murdered, the Dark Presence possesses Alan 3, so he has no time to make further edits. In this way, we can confirm that Alan 2 was the only editor of Return. The pages disappear, except for Return's title page, with the author scratched out. One page goes with Alan 3 in his hand when he is summoned. This must be how the pages left the Dark Place, as part of or as a side effect of the summoning ritual. Alan 1 sees the title page and sees the dead Alan 2. Alan 1 is taken over by the Dark Presence. Alan 3 is summoned to Cauldron Lake by Saga. The Dark Presence is dormant within him.
In the dark place, the Dark Presence went into me. When I was pulled back here, crossing over weakened it, made it dormant. I couldn't remember what had happened, but I could feel it, getting stronger, waking up. I thought it was hunting me, closing in. It was inside me the whole time, and then it took over. Turned me into Scratch.
Saga fights Scratch, trapping him in the FBC containment unit. Scratch leaves Alan to possess Casey. Alan enters the DFS ending. He enters the writer's room in the attic of the Valhalla nursing home, where he writes an ending with Saga. He gets shot with a light bullet. In the base game, he restarts the loop that isn't a loop, but in the final draft he survives and Scratch no longer exists. We see the projected Alan 3 get summoned by Saga, but we do not see the Writer of Initiation again. Does that mean that the Writer of Initiation is still in the writer's room we see at the start? Does that mean that there's a projected Alan who escapes, and our Alan who is still trapped? I don't think so. Going to Dark Ocean summoning, the old gods of Asgard want Alan to... This makes me think that the Alans combine to become whole. That would include the Writer of Initiation, Alan 3, and the dark presence within him to form Scratch. As with previous songs by the old gods, there is a spoken section. This time, it seems to be about the dark presence hiding within the summoned Alan. When it came to Dark, Twisted and Cruel, I thought it would be a good idea to find out what was going on in the very first run. More than I thought, it turned out. Wikipedia states, Raoul Duke is the partially fictionalized author surrogate character and sometimes pseudonym used by Hunter S. Thompson as the main character and anti-hero for many of his works. In 2005, sitting in front of a typewriter, he shot himself in the head at Owl Farm. His wife said that she mistook the cocking of the gun for the sound of his typewriter keys and hung up as he fired. His daughter-in-law and grandson believed the gunshot to be the sound of a book falling. The similarities to Alan continue, as Wikipedia goes on to state. Thompson is often credited as the creator of gonzo journalism, a style of writing that blurs distinctions between fiction and non-fiction. Thompson almost always wrote in the first person, while extensively using his own experiences and emotions to colour the story he was trying to follow. In a 1978 interview with the BBC, Thompson said,
"It seems I am living a normal life. Meanwhile, this right alongside me, this myth is growing and mushrooming and getting more and more warped. And like when I go out to when I get invited to speak at, say, universities, I'm not sure if they're inviting Duke or Thompson. So I'm not sure who to be."
By now, it's obvious that Scratch and Alan seem to be inspired by the life of this journalist. Who is Buck? The closest writer I could find is Charles Bukowski, who died of leukemia. His writing was titled Los Angeles. In an interview with London Magazine in 1974, he said, "You live in a town all your life, and you get to know every street corner. You've got the layout of the whole land. You have a picture of where you are. Since I was raised in LA, I've always had the geographical and spiritual feeling of being here. I've had time to learn this city. I can't see any other place than LA." This could be linked to the dark place taking on the appearance of Alan's home of New York. Hemingway is one of the names Nightingale called Alan in 2010. He committed suicide by shooting himself with his favourite shotgun. As for why these dead authors fit together, I do not know.
Stay in my crowd, fit together like the shotgun fits in Hemingway's mouth. I carved down my blood, I write with your blood. I created this world, and first came the word. You have no light in sight, just endless darkness to fight. The horror story comes true. I'm dark, twisted, and cruel. this town. I'm the ants inside your walls, the quiet knocking on your door. It's not your story to write. Scratch out your words in the night. When the writer is in doubt, I turn to come out.
Beginning. A primordial forest. The colors of the fall. The mist. A caldera lake. Silence echoes. Loud. It's too late to hear the words. The man, naked, crawls to the shore. Like a birth? To say that would be a lie. Nothing like a birth. The opposite. He staggers to his feet. A carcass of a deer lies on the shore, rotting amidst driftwood. The man is afraid, beside himself. Who is he? He doesn't himself know. Dark waves have washed it away. A blank page where this horror story will be written. He remembers darkness, feels the shadow pressing down on him, coming after him. He must get away. He runs to the forest, to a fate worse than death.
On my second run, I noticed something interesting with the voices from different perspectives. Ed and Tammy Booker see Nightingale, shining their flashlights at him. Nightingale reacts as a normal human would. The light doesn't appear to harm him. He appears to be in control, speaking to himself calmly, not like the Taken. Compare that to what the Bookers experienced.
So what did you see in the woods?
This naked dude came out of the lake, and he was acting crazy, shouting weird shit at us. He must have been on something.
Unless skinny dipping at dawn is a thing around here.
When Nightingale sees a Cult of the Tree member, their speech is distorted. When Nightingale is attacked by the Cult of the Tree, who attempt to perform the ritual on him, they look and sound like the Taken to Nightingale, who is the only one here who is actually Taken. From a distance, the bookers sounded normal. Why is there a difference? Is this because the cult is attacking Nightingale? Is this because time has passed and Nightingale has had further flashes of the dark presence? Is this what taken individuals experience? That adds a whole other layer of horror to the world.
Wake is in custody. How have you been in contact with him?
He leaves me messages in funny places, like the newspaper, books. Once he even wrote to me with a cloud. If it's something really important, he tells me in a dream.
In one of these dreams, Rose was asked to send the angel lamp.
When Cynthia Weaver was downstairs at breakfast, Rose snuck into her room. With all the lamps in the room, it took her a while to find the one with an angel. Luckily, the dream Alan had sent her had been very clear. Rose was certain that Cynthia would not miss one lamp. She had so many. Tonight, Rose would put the lamp in a shoebox and let it sink into the garden pond. That's what Alan wanted. That's how she could help him. The thought made her whole body buzz with joy. Cynthia knew the lamp was missing the very moment she came back to her room. She was overcome by grief. It had been Tom's lamp, one of the few things that reminded her of him. It had not worked in a long time with the cord severed and the light switch gone. But there are other kinds of lights than the ones we can see. The invisible light of the angel lamp had held Cynthia together all these years. With tears welling in her eyes, she didn't see the shadows shifting in the corners of her room.
At the Odia diner, Rose left a note saying that Alan hid a message in a newspaper asking if she was ready. In her latest meeting with Alan, she talks about more messages.
Pushy.
Rose, right? From the diner. How are you here?
I'm here to save you, silly. I got your instructions. I found every hidden message you left for me. In the radio, in the wind, in the forums on my Alan Wake fan site.
What? No, Rose, I haven't been leaving you any messages.
Oh, I get it. Yes, Alan, only a crazy person would think you've been leaving them secret messages. Wink. But now you need to get your butt upstairs, Alan. This shit won't right itself, no matter what William Shakespeare said.
Right. Thank you, Rose.
Is she being given instructions by a future version of Alan? An Alan that would have warned her that the Alan we played as wouldn't know about these messages and would think that she is crazy. In Initiation 8, Alan is called by his future self. It feels like it works in the same way as Quantum Break, which is also just the best way to do time travel. Alan puts the photos there because he told himself to, before he calls himself to tell himself to put them there, closing the loop. There is a future Alan helping himself out, laying the path. It's not beyond reason for a future version of Alan to be sending Rose messages.
The dark place operates in loops. Time is a story. I'm calling you from a different point in that story.
From the future? I'm never getting out of here, am I?
Yes, you will. And no, you won't. And that is by your own choice.
What does that mean?
I'm sorry for what you'll have to go through.
Knitting keeps popping up in the game, but it's easy to miss. In one of Rose's lunchboxes, she writes, "How'd you like the knitting, hero? I had it made just for you." In her mind place, Saga thinks to herself, the note inside mentions making knitting just for me. How do they know I knit? Or maybe just a coincidence. Saga has a conversation with Mandy May at the Valhalla nursing home.
That's some fascinating knit work, Mandy May. What's your inspiration?
Oh, I don't know. It is what it wants to be. Taking a break from making those little ornaments for Rose. Do you knit?
I dabbled when I was pregnant. Socks, mittens, the usual stuff.
Oh, how about knitting me some underwear?
One more crude remark from you, Norman, and I'll put this needle in your ear.
Later that night, Mandy May cuts herself knitting without even realizing.
Mandy May, are you alright? You're bleeding.
Oh, How did that happen?
Oh, no, Mandy May. Oh, no!
Oh, don't be a crybaby, Norman. It's nothing. I just poked my finger knitting this monster of a blanket.
Is there more to this?
Rose woke up from another dream from her idol. Another message. All through her morning routine, she was humming happily. So happily, she realized she was starting to forget what Alan had told her. Something about a hero who would come to save them all. And the hero... Rose frowned. This won't do, Rose Marigold. You know better than to forget. Something about knitwear. The hero liked it? Rose nodded, determined. She'd use the knitwork to guide the hero to the secret stashes she had hid in the forest to help them. Knitwear to mark the spot. Alan will love that, she thought. Now she only needed the knitwork. Rose thought hard. Mandy May was always knitting. Mandy May would help her.
Knitting seems to have a deeper connection to Saga. I hope to see more of this as the story develops. On my first run, I noticed that Logan's photos clearly show her facing a direction, either left or right. The photos are not an exact match, but it's still something I kept an eye out for. In photos referring to her death by drowning, she looks to the left. She looks to the left in the newspaper that Saga finds in her trailer. In photos confirming her survival, she looks to the right. She looks to the right in Saga's mind place. When Saga is thrown into the dark place, the first photo she places on the board has Logan looking to the right, confirming her survival. The following photos of Logan have her facing left, as the other Saga gives in to the story. This is thrown off by her looking to the left on Saga's phone when she calls her at the end. Either this is intentional, or I'm looking too deep into two different photos.
Aika särkyy ikuisuuteen, laukaus kajahtaa. Ei onnellista loppua hän kohtaa milloinkaan. Niin monta kertaa kerrottu tää tarina jo on. Sankarilla 1000 kasvo, polku lohduton.
Near the start of Return, in the morgue, Saga pulls out a page from Nightingale's chest cavity. Tim remembers that pages were part of a different case, and goes to collect the case file. The lights flicker, and he looks up. He panics, but his words indicate to me that Tim has been through this before, or he knows that this happened to someone else.
No, wait!
Mr. Door shows up very briefly on screen because he is the one who sends Tim to the dark place, taking the page about Door traversing the dark place with him.
Hello?
In the dark place, we learn that Tim has met Alan before we start playing as him, but Alan doesn't remember in our first meeting.
Sorry. Have we met?
Memory problems again, huh? Yeah, we've met. Tim Breaker. We've shared notes. Hey, I've made some progress on the map. If you want.
In the final draft, we see that the whiteboard of notes resets and we have the same conversations as in the base game. This tells us that Tim's past does not include previous loops. He is not like Zane. He is not like Door. Tim is stuck in the loop with us. Therefore, normal people don't remember loops. They forget. Tim's main goal in the dark place is to investigate Warlin Door. When Alan brings up the talk show host, Tim immediately dismisses him as one of Mr. Door's many disguises. Why?
But never the one thing that I'm looking for. Feel free to check the map out. Oh, I've been stockpiling supplies while I poke around. If you find a stash, take anything you need.
I appreciate the help. Who's this mystery man?
Oh, it wouldn't be much of a mystery if I knew. All I have is a name. Warlin Door.
The talk show host?
No. No, that doesn't sound like him. The guy has many disguises, but a talk show host? No. I'll keep looking.
Missing time.
He talks about his dreams.
The dreams. Sometimes I wake up in a completely different place, missing entire days. I have no idea what happened, but I'm trying to find out. Things always get better if you just keep moving forward, Alan.
So you think this is a dream?
I'm not ruling it out. You know, my dreams have always been incredibly vivid. They feel real until the second I wake up. In dreams, I'm often someone else. A different person with a different name, living a different life in a different world. Alternate realities, maybe. But certain things don't change. Like Door.
The sketch you have does look like the Door I know. The talk show host.
All I know is the Door has something to do with what's happening to me. And he knows that I know. He's like some sadistic mastermind torturing me.
Who is the dreamer? This line of thinking will immediately bring Quantum Break to mind, especially with Tim Baker being portrayed by Shawn Ashmore, the same actor who portrayed the protagonist of Quantum Break. But wait, there's more. In yet another whiteboard in a Remedy game, we find some interesting thoughts from the sheriff. Dreams. Me, but not me. This would seem to be Jack Joyce, the protagonist of Quantum Break. Others I know, yet they are different. The red-headed woman. The only red-headed woman I can think of is Jessie Faden. Door, gate, portal, port, opening, access window. A hatch is a port, an opening, an access. Lance Reddick portrayed Martin Hatch in Quantum Break as a shifter, a being that can exist in any time at any place. When Saga profiles Door, he says this.
A door that stands between two rooms is in both. A door that can lead anywhere is everywhere. That door is the center. He governs the currents of reality.
With all the powers mixed up in this, it's hard to know who's playing who. Opening too many doors. This isn't important right now. I can look into it later. The page describes him moving through the door. How can I do that?
The dark place has many faces and many names. It is a mirror, reflecting all possible realities. The family of doors have the power to shift between these realities, here and elsewhere.
Tim has an obsession with polyhedrons. Well, first off, what is a polyhedron? Tim calls them pure mathematical shapes. A polyhedron is a three-dimensional shape with flat faces and straight edges and sharp corners. So a pyramid, a cube, a couple of pyramids stuck together as an octahedron, a dodecahedron. A dodecahedron? Where have we seen that before? The CFR in Quantum Break is a dodecahedron. Even just looking at the word reminds us of Control with Hedron. Both of these are related to Courtney Hope. She played Jessie Faden in Control and played Beth Wilder, someone close to Jack Joyce, in Quantum Break. Tim even recognizes this when he writes that he knows her, but wonders where he knows her from. At the end of Quantum Break, Jack tells Beth that he will come back for her. This is called back to on the whiteboard. Tim writes that he sees polyhedrons in his dreams. This is a bit of a stretch now, but there is a track in the Quantum Break soundtrack called You See Me in My Dreams. He notes that polyhedrons contain energy. A vessel, like Hedron, Polaris, a weapon, the CFR. Of course, we could be looking too deep into this now, and Tim just has dreams of RPG dice. Let's move on to Door. We get a lot of information from Tim, who can be found by listening out for him humming the Night Springs theme tune.
Hey Tim, new map, huh?
Yep. Like, I've never been to New York, but I can tell you that this ain't it.
I heard you humming again.
Yeah, I can't get this song out of my head. It's a real earworm. I hear it in my dreams.
I know that song you keep humming. It's the theme from Night Springs.
That old sci-fi show?
Sci-fi horror anthology. I used to write for a long time ago.
Look, it sounds a bit nuts, but I think the song is connected to Door. Or it's my subconscious telling me that this is all pretty out there.
In Control, we learn that Night Springs was in consideration of becoming a property of the FBC. In The Dark Place, we see a video of Mr. Door hosting the new season. In this intro, Door talks directly to us, the players.
Good evening. A writer trapped in a dream world attempts to write a story to shape reality around him and escape. He is beset by visions leaking in from realities beyond his own. He uses those visions as inspiration for his stories, in hopes of giving them power, to make them come true. Us, hidden few, know that ultimately he will succeed. But for that, many of his stories collapse back into the stuff that dreams are made of, to remain as they began, works of fiction. And yet, maybe there is a gleam of truth to be unearthed from these tales. Rare glimpse into the unseen realities beyond our own, offering us intriguing avenues of contemplation as they transpire in Night Springs.
Door went missing in 1988. That's 35 years before Alan Wake 2. Has he aged?
Are you related to Sarah Breaker? She was the sheriff of Bright Falls back in 2010.
Yeah, she's my cousin. I had a police sketch made of Door based on my dreams. I sent it around and Sarah recognized the face from an old case file from the 80s. I moved out there to look into it and became sheriff after she left to join the feds.
Did Sarah leave to join the FBC or the FBI?
Funny, me too. What was in the case file about Door?
Not a lot of details in it. A local man named Warlin Door went missing near Cauldron Lake. Eyewitnesses claim he was struck by a bolt of lightning and just vanished. I never found any official records of a Warlin Door living in town or anywhere. Another dead end.
Lightning would immediately go with Tor. Anger's remorse seemingly refers to Door as Where is Door from? I'm not on board with Tim's belief that he is an alien, but he does question whether Door is his real name, again hinting at Martin Hatch being the same as Warlin Door. An alias could also explain the lack of address. Near the end of Initiation, Alan and Door have a chilling confrontation. He reveals that the talk show was fake, but why would he want to indulge Alan?
I don't have time for this, so let's get over with. Tell me, was this all fake? A show?
No one said otherwise, Mr. Wake.
It would appear that Mr. Door knows the truth behind Scratch.
We can stop pretending now.
Masks come off.
Oh, I wouldn't go that far. I don't even think you know who's under your mask, but you know how to make things difficult for yourself. All these rules, endless, convoluted loops you insist on going through.
Did Alan force himself through the loops? What does Door know? Door knows how to navigate the dark place. Does he see it for what it truly is?
You are so lucky, you know. There are so many people helping you. armies of people. Myself. Your wife.
Door admits to helping Alan. How? He even knows about Alice. Has he seen her?
She's in danger.
She is. Because of you. And so is someone important to me, someone you pulled into this.
Everything points towards Saga being the daughter of Mr. Door. Alan wrote Saga into return. The father doll looks somewhat similar to him, and he caused the rift between Freya Anderson and Tor.
I have to go now.
Door knows about the loops, just as the old gods do. Loops do not affect him.
This and our Night Springs was a nice distraction.
Does Door refer to Night Springs due to a future DLC, American Nightmare, or something else entirely?
The next time we meet, the circumstances will be very different. And you would do well to return the favor by playing your part. Or stay out of my way, Mr. Wake.
Alan owes Door. Is this linked to Door's earlier admission of support, or something more sinister?
Whatever you say. Door didn't seem happy to see me this time.
Fearing the master is the root of wisdom. But don't let the game get you down. He's playing his role.
Artie makes it seem like Door fears Alan. Why? Door seems to hold more power than Alan. He allowed Alan to note his movements in Tim Baker's manuscript page. On the other side of this, we have the old gods of Asgard. We see a young version of them in the Dark Place. Boulder is there too, even though Bob had leukemia. Young Boulder also shows up at the Dark Ocean summoning, in the sky. Is he some kind of Dark Place projection of him? Like Barry was in the DLC of the first game. An important note here is that Odin's left eye has an eye patch in the Dark Place, but it is his right eye outside of that and in the 2010 game. A manuscript page describes what happened in 1988, the year that Door disappeared.
It's 1988, a face-off between deities on the rim of Cauldron Lake, high above its dark waters. Thunder roared, the old gods facing something even more powerful, something harder to define even. Or, changing the perspective, raving lunatics all, caught up in the frenzy of a shared delusion. The old gods, the corsairs of the Sea of Night, and the Dark One who yearned to stand in between, who had always stood in between, who would soon stand in between. We help you, you stay away from our family, Tor Anderson snarled over the thunder. Yes, until you all come to me, came the answer. That's never gonna happen, shouted Odin. I will take this as collateral, shall you remember our deal, said the Dark One. Blood arched from Odin's face as he fell to his knees. Lightning hit the dark figure on the cliff, and with that, he was gone. Tor rushed to his brother. Are you alright, bro? Effectively blind in that moment, the eye patch covering his left eye, his hand over the now empty socket of his right, blood oozing out of it. Odin cursed. The bastard took the wrong eye.
In 1988, a deal was made to help Door in exchange for him staying away from the Andersons, and in doing so, Tor drives him away. Odin's right eye was taken to remember this deal. Sometime in between 1988 and 2010, Odin regains his left eye. How? Door believes that the Andersons will return to him, and we do see this happen after the summoning, when Odin reveals that they performed in the show and tried to bury the hatchet.
Hey, kiddo. We were afraid we'd miss you again. So good to see you. Glad we caught you, kiddo. We missed you first time around.
First time?
We've been performing on Door's show. We finally buried the hatchet. I haven't buried shit, bro. We're just helping Tom.
Time for a dip in the fountain. I'm leaving the Dark Place. Come with me.
Our time back there is done. But you got this, dear Saga. Adi has set up a puddle for you to swim out of. Once more with feeling.
I wish we'd gotten more time together.
This isn't goodbye, kiddo. Tom told us not to say anything about what's coming. But we'll see each other again.
Why do they look younger in the talk show? Why does the eye patch switch position? And why is Boulder there? Adding to this mystery, the posters for musical tracks have the young versions of the old gods, with Odin missing his left eye. We know that Balance Slays the Demon was a new single, produced by Barry Wheeler and after the loss of Fat Bob, so why does that have the young gods of Asgard, again with Boulder? We get some further background in a note by Odin's bed. We know that he took out his right eye when he was drunk on moonshine during the 1976 AWE, in which they valiantly defeated a dark army of the Scratching Hag rising from Cauldron Lake. We just saw that in 1988, Door took his right eye from him. He calls Door, he who stands on the threshold being the dark place, a place that vibrates at a different frequency to our own. In Norse mythology, Odin gave his eye. Some versions depict it as the left eye, others show the right eye, to Mimir, the Norse god of wisdom, to drink from the well of wisdom. Odin sacrificed his eye to gain divine wisdom. He also fathered 2 sons by 2 wives, Balder and Thor. In the RCU, Odin notes that he gave his eye to Mimir before time, to drink from the cauldron. The Anderson moonshine uses water directly from Cauldron Lake, and time doesn't function in the same way in the dark place. The Andersons have power as seers. Odin sacrificed his eye. Odin has this power. Thor has this power. But Balder isn't an Anderson, and that's just me grasping for a link. Odin was drinking when he lost his eye before time. Odin was drinking when he lost his eye in 1976. I do not know if Odin was drinking when he lost his eye in 1988. There may or may not be a link, but he will lose his eye again. That's a lot of eye movements, it's tough to keep track of. Let's recap. Before time, he has both eyes. He sacrifices an eye to gain divine wisdom and potentially gains the Anderson power that way. We do not know about the ancestors of the old gods of Asgard. They may be the first in line. Maybe. Somehow. He regains his eye by 1976. In 1976, he takes out his right eye himself. By 1988, he has lost his left eye to have an eye patch there. By 1988, he has regained his right eye before Door removes it, rendering him blind. By 2010, he regains his left eye. His right eye is still lost. In the posters of musical tracks released after Bob died from leukemia, and in The Dark Place, he looks younger and his eyes reverse position. This section is premature, but I still want to talk about the Sea of Night while we're on the topic of the Andersons. A page titled with The Sea of Night is by Odin's bed, with a poster for the song on the opposite wall. The Sea of Night released as part of the Greatest Hits album for a hint of what's to come. What is written on the page appears to be an early concept of the song, giving us a hint at the songwriting process, if true. To drink from the cup of the wise one, for wisdom to be a seer, I gave up my eye. We covered this in the previous section. Odin drank from the well of wisdom using a cup from Mimir. I gave up my eye in the light of the moon to shine and see.
The cold of a silent past, the moon in silver cast, it shine a vision quest, for us it gives no rest, through the beat of time, the flowing waves of rhyme, we are guided by Odin's all-seeing
the many worlds to madness and beyond, across the dark dreaming sea.
On the dreaming sea.
The branching paths of the tree, I gave up my eyes so many times. We have lived and died and been reborn.
And into wondrous worlds we go with sails unfurled, to battles lost and won, to madness and beyond. On the branches of life's tree, witness reality, split up into myriad lives beyond all divides. We have been warriors, poets and elder gods, brought back a bounty to our homeland and you.
Yggdrasil, the most famous of Norse trees, is the Norse tree of life. Every world in Norse mythology is among the branches of life's tree. Do the old gods take on different identities in different worlds or realities? We have met here before, and will keep on meeting still.
Like music we lead your waves once more, and sail to another shore.
Thankfully, Barry's influence on this game isn't limited to a street name in the Dark Places version of New York, even if it is nice to see that Barry is still in Alan's mind. We learn more about what happened to him in some emails on a computer in the Dark Place. The background of the computer looks like Alice's film with Alan, Sunrise, from American Nightmare. Back in July 2021, Barry was in Hollywood, defending Al's legacy. Everyone wants to gobble up the film rights for the Casey books, and they have moronic ideas of what to do with them. I'm painfully aware of how deeply Al would have hated adaptations if they didn't do justice to his vision. We get to see Alan react to an unfaithful adaptation, cough, Max Payne, cough, in The Dark Place.
Welcome back to the show. So, Alan, as the creator of the character, how do you feel about this?
Sorry, what?
I know it can be an awkward question with the man sitting right next to you, but I mean, how do you feel about him in the role of Casey? Does he look the part to you?
He looks exactly like I always imagined Casey to be. It's uncanny.
Thank you. That means so much to me. I'm a huge fan of your books.
So, what's the problem, Alan? Because on more than one occasion, you voiced your reservations about the adaptations.
It's not that. They're their own thing. They've gone with choices that are different from mine. I feel protective about my stories, and these adaptations... I don't know. I guess I just wish I could have been more involved in making them.
Skip ahead 10 months to May 2022, Barry joins a cult, the Blessed Wellness Retreat. Someone told him about it, and Barry managed to relax there, losing a ton of weight. The guy who runs this place, Chester, is a goddamn miracle worker, not a whacker in any way. Chester Bless is mentioned in Control as an antagonist. The file on the Guru's surfboard describes the surfboard as a proven miracle worker. Chester Bless ran a self-help course titled The Power of the Board, which attracted thousands of people in the early 90s. It looks like Bless resurfaced, reaching Barry decades later. Chester told Barry that something bad would happen if Barry stayed in New York. instead of moving to the West Coast. Why? How did he know? The FBC wanted to talk to Barry, seemingly in New York. Why? Barry doesn't hear back from Alice over the next month. 9 months later, Barry gets angry about people making money off What Happened to Alan. The sharks at Hollywood wanted to turn What Happened to Al into a movie and/or a TV show and/or, get this, a video game. He also tells Tammy Booker's publisher that they would sue. 2 months later, Barry emails Alice one more time. Barry asks if she needs anything on the business side of the Dark Place exhibition, so it has not launched yet, and Alice has not arrived at Cauldron Lake yet, but Barry cannot reach her. Alternatively, Alice arrives at Cauldron Lake around this time and did not need anything on the business side. Finally, there's a line during the Endless DFS that hints at a return.
Is our dear author planning something for the future? Well, whatever it is, I'm on board.
Could this be in the Night Springs DLC? We last saw Barry in a room with a TV playing Alan's return attempt, which was framed as a Night Springs episode, so this could be a nice way of bringing him back.
Far, far away from Night Springs.
No? Al?
This isn't just a song about Saga, it's a song about Alice. Once we got to
Thornton's shitty pastrami sandwich,
I realised that when profiling taken, the speech of the profiled character is read from a manuscript.
Shitty pastrami sandwich.
And in the final draft, I realised that the fade-outs in the dark place say things that Alan said in the Drowning video of Writer's Journey.
I'm drowning. I'm trying to way out. There's no way out. It's deeper. This is hell. I'm in hell. I died. I wish I was dead. Let me die. I just want to sleep, please. Let me sleep. I'm so tired. I just want to go home. I've written so much. I write. There's nothing left. It's all gone. I don't know how to write. All the words are gone. There's no more words. What do you think I will tell you the words? I don't recognize these words. Where are the words moving?
In the Stop Writing video, we see Alan in two places at once, and it looks like he is fading away.
I have to stop. Stop running. Stop writing. I won't write another word. It's too dangerous. Only horror comes out of it. People get hurt. I will let the currents of this ocean wash me away. But what if I forget?
The only thing that stops me from thinking that the fade-outs are versions of Alan that gave up on writing is that we fight them by using the flashlight, and that reveals that they look like citizens of Bright Falls. Lumi Vista is the brand of the television. Translated from Finnish, Lumi gives us snow, but I could not get a translation for Vista. However, translating Vista from Italian gives us sight. Luminosa is Italian for bright, and Lume is Italian for light. So I feel like this could translate to something like light sight. What's more interesting than the translation is that Remedy trademarked this. Why would they do that? Are there bigger plans for this brand? Is this a legal situation that I don't understand? This game really leans into the theories combining Zane and Wake. Listening to the rest of the Drowning video, Alan reflects on his name.
This is familiar. Oh, this is familiar. I've been here before. Have I said this before? I've read this somewhere. Where am I? Who am I? Alan Wake. Wake? That's a strange name, eh? Wake? That sounds like a character's name. Wait, I write the name up? I make that name up? I don't want to be a character. I don't want to be the story. Just write the story.
Artie, the water god, calls him Tom.
And my name's Alan, not Tom.
Ja, mutta katoppa kun a man, but a man with a tool makes two, Tom. Eikö niin? And a man with a tool can build his own exit.
Saga finds a photo of Zane with Barbara.
Thomas Zane looked just like Wake. Is this why Odin keeps calling him Tom?
We must always pay attention to the Andersons now that we know that their memories are unaffected by the story, effectively carrying the knowledge of their original timeline, if you want to call it that.
I'm Tom Zane. Welcome to the House of Zane.
The poet. The diver. You look like me. How the hell?
Or maybe you look like me, you handsome devil. The diver was a beloved character I played in one of my films.
A film based on a story by Alan Wake. Cynthia said he used to be so famous, but she knew him as a poet. With the 2010 game, I voiced my issues with the knee-jerk reaction of some thinking that Zane created Wake, or Wake created Zane. What we see in the sequel leans towards a close relationship, but happily keeps the eventual explanation as being more complicated than that. Let's revisit the first game.
There's an old town road with mystery of Tom the poet and his muse, and I'm not
magic lake which gave a life to the words the poet used. The Muse, she went down to the lake, and in the waves she drowned. The poet came down to the lake to call out to his dear. When there was no answer, he was overcome with fear. And when he swore to bring back his love by stories he'd create, nightmares shifted in their sleep in the darkness of the lake. In the dead of night she came to him with darkness in her eyes. We're in a morning gown, sweet words as high as skies. He took her in without a word, for he saw his grave mistake, and vowed them both to silence deep beneath the lake. Now if it's real or just a dream, one mystery remains, for it is said on moonless nights they may still haunt this place.
This House of Dreams tells us that the original Zane and Jagger live in a baby universe. In Alan Wake 2, we see the legend of Witch's Ladle. This may be linked to the scratching hag that is Barbara Jagger. A local sheriff loved a lady who did not love him back. He accused her of bewitching him and was drowned as a result. Her dropped ladle grew into the extremely tall tree that was named the Witch's Ladle. But then the woman returned to avenge her wrongdoers, killing the sheriff and drowning him in the lake. She took out his heart and locked it in a box. Zane cut out Barbara's heart and dove into the lake. The witch would then use the heart to summon him from the lake to exact revenge on her behalf. The depiction we see of the witch, particularly of her wearing black clothing with a white necklace, reminds me of Barbara Jagger in 2010. This legend seems to twist the story of the poet and the muse. At the start of the final draft, Alan refers to Tom.
A fictional poet once said, "Beyond the shadow you settle for, there is a miracle illuminated. I will not settle for a shadow. I'll find the miracle through the night."
This comes down to Alan meeting Tom as a filmmaker. In Watery Swomey Hall, we see a poster for Tom the Poet, the film in which the diver was a role played by Zane. This was also in the remaster of events in 2010. The poet changed to the writer of a film based on a novel by Alan Wake. Other characters that Alan met are also cast in their respective roles. Cynthia, the Lady of the Light, notices the change. I found something funny while I was down there. A newspaper article about Tom, but it called him a filmmaker. Tom didn't make movies, he was a poet. A magnificent poet. I dug around and found film equipment, supposedly also Tom's. What is happening? This isn't right. I know it isn't. And going back to Control, we have Jesse's confusion on who Zane was.
You mentioned a poem last time we talked. By Thomas Zane?
Yes. Beyond the shadow you settle for, there's a miracle illuminated.
I looked the poem up. Only I couldn't find any poet by that name. I did find a European filmmaker who moved here in the 60s, named Thomas Zane.
What? I don't...
No matter. It suits you very well. The poem. How you see things. Maybe you wrote it yourself?
I didn't.
No matter.
That was Alan Wake, the writer who went missing in that AWE case I read about. What's he doing here? And Thomas Zane was with him. The poet. No, wait. He was a filmmaker. I always remember that wrong.
Zane and Barbara took the dive into Cauldron Lake in 1970 after living in the cabin at Diver's Isle. That same year, the island was destroyed by a volcanic eruption. When exploring the rental cabins, Saga finds an article in which Kathy Waller, a lifelong resident of Bright Falls and a volcanologist, was interviewed. Why did she report that there has been no documented volcanic activity in this region for millennia?
Urban legends circling Thomas Zane were a bottomless rabbit hole. I'd done some digging. To film freaks, he was a mythic auteur in the art house cinema. A rising star coming to America from Finland. But he only created one film, Tom the Poet, before he went missing, mirroring the vanishing of the main character in the movie, played by himself. The biggest mystery was around his lost film, an early work made in Finland, Nightless Night, rumored to have mystic properties. Some claimed it was a snuff film, that the ritual murder in the film was an actual murder. There were no known survivors. Chasing people for their unholy grail, just like Waite's books were.
Nightless Night was an early work, but it was lost, leaving just one other film, Tom the Poet.
We're in this together. Two artists collaborating, remember? Crafting the keys to our escape. Your magnum opus, Return, and its companion piece, my film. Sharing our life-altering visions, a melding of higher minds. Dreaming up our transcendental work of art. Here, in this room, in this room, in this room, in this room.
Assuming that Zane is talking about Nightless Night, this pushes back against Nightless Night being an early European work. You'd think that Zane's earliest film would need to be written before he entered the Dark Place, and before he met Scratch, and before he created a companion piece to Return. A fast-paced montage follows as the happy song plays, which could be seen as a theme for Mr. Scratch. We can read the newspaper that Cynthia found. Thomas Zane and Barbara Jagger were born in Finland and moved to Bright Falls, where the House of Zane was established as an artist commune. Zane brought the old manor house outside town, but this conflicts with the plaque inside the Valhalla nursing home, where Barry stated that the house was originally built in 1965 by an unknown architect for the Finnish filmmaker Thomas Zane.
Welcome to the emergency muster point!
You all should stay out here a while. Until it's safe.
I'm happy to get out of that house. Isn't it strange that I've lived in Bright Falls my whole life and I can't remember this building?
The house has always been here, Norman. Remember when that poor Nora girl drowned in the bunker? Those Andersons got it so cheap because it's haunted. You get what you pay for.
Nightless Night was a popular film in Europe, and Zane was very popular internationally. He chose the name of Ocean View Hotel for his dream hotel. We find him inside the Ocean View Hotel in the Dark Place. Also worth mentioning is that he is another entity that keeps his memory as the Dark Place spirals. He was surprised when Alan remembered him.
Alan Wake? Do you know who I am?
How the fuck could I?
Whoa! There's that famous temper. Lucky thing I'm not a paparazzi.
You keep jerking me around, refusing to tell me who you are.
You remember? Oh, fuck me. Alan, listen. Tell me, how much What do you remember?
Back in Swomey Hall, there is a flyer for the Bright Falls Film Society. Thomas Emerson, the mullet time ranter from the 2010 game, was set to give a guest lecture on the Dark Doppelganger in the art and life of Thomas Zane, originally Thomas Sane, the auteur. He would discuss Zane's early career in Finland, his artist commune in Bright Falls, and his mysterious disappearance in 1970. Tom the Poet is described as a lost work, so all 2 films by Zane have been lost. Zane had a thing for playing his own dark double in his films, and doubles have been involved in Alan's story. After the ominous meeting with Mr. Door, Alan speaks to Artie.
Door didn't seem happy to see me this time.
Fearing the master is the root of wisdom. But don't let the game get you down. He's playing his role. Maybe put him in your films, Tom, like you have put me. Sehän olisikin.
What films?
I'm a fan of your masterworks. There is Tom the Poet, my favorite, and Yöten Yö is the most famous one, of course. And is it true what I hear, that it's coming back to cinemas soon? Is there a bottom to this rumor?
This got me thinking about the cast of Nightless Night. Nightless Night is presented by the Dark Place Movie Company. What was the background of this company back when this film was made in Finland? Nightless Night is a movie by Thomas Zane. Like Tom the Poet, it is based on a book by Alan Wake, with his Finnish name on screen. Alex Casey is the detective. Barbara Jagger is the writer's widow. Ilmari Huatari is the murderer. Ati is the janitor. Thomas Zane plays Alan Wake, the writer of the book that the film is based on. Every person in this short cast list was affected by the Dark Presence, with the exception of Thomas Zane, as far as we know, and Ati, a god, or at least a powerful entity. Barbara Jagger was possessed in 1970. Alan Wake was possessed to form Scratch, and Alex Casey was possessed when the clicker was used for DFS. Ilmari Huatari was a famous murderer from Watery who hid the bodies of victims in the Huatari well with the help of his brother Jacopi. He got caught for the murder of his own brother. Ilmari claimed that the evil water spirit, the Naki, possessed him when he murdered. There's a connection that has been developed between the Dark Place and water, so I see this as Ilmari being possessed by the Dark Presence. Huatari also sounds like watery, so this could be the origin of the town's name. A quick Wikipedia search told me that the Nordic Naki were male water spirits who played enchanted songs on the violin, luring women and children to drown in lakes or streams. Stories also exist wherein the spirit agrees to live with a human being who had fallen in love with him. Still, many of these stories ended with the Naki returning to his home, usually a nearby waterfall or brook. Ati sings some lines that praise Scratch. This is the revelation that we get at the end of the final draft. The Dark Presence explodes out of Alan's head. This is Alan's key to escape, so it's interesting to see that this was added into Zane's film, a companion piece to Scratch's return. Poet Cinema, where we watch Zane's film, is connected through an overlap with the Huatari well. Inside the overlap that reminds me of Control's Nightmare filter, there's a scene that I really didn't want to go through with on my first run. Killing Sam Lake.
Who's there? Look, you got the wrong guy. I'm not Alex Casey. I only play him in the movies. He's just a fictional character.
What's going on here?
You don't have to kill me. You don't have to go get that knife and stab me. You can just give up and go back. Forget about the ritual sacrifice to open the way forward.
The ritual sacrifice to open the way?
No. Don't do it. You don't have to become a monster. Just leave the knife where it is, in the back, and go.
A knife in the back? Everything about this was absurd. Our dialogue forced and ridiculous. In desperate need of another pass. But I'd play along to see where it took me.
Let's forget about the knife. Don't go looking for the knife. There is no knife.
Knife.
Oh no! Oh no, you don't! You'll be sorry!
What the fuck?
On the watery side of this overlap, a body can be seen on the ground. I think that's Sam Lake.
Welcome. Our guest tonight is Alan Wake. This time he wanted to do something.
I was back, and I hadn't forgotten. I knew how this worked now. I could take control, no more surprises.
What demons he wrestles with in the dark hours of the night. Together with our house band, the divine old gods of Asgard, we have created something very special. The song is called Herald of Darkness, but I like to call this next segment the story of the journey of Alan Wake, the musical. Just do what we always do. We'll chat, but instead of talking, we'll sing it.
In the We Sing chapter, it looks like Alan's being forced into the musical, like he doesn't want to be in the screen. How did Alan end up in the musical screens? Did he forget? It looks like Alan is screaming in the finale to the musical. Is he being forced to dance?
The passage of time is deceiving.
The days of our lives are fleeting,
And they end in the end. They end. So, how have you been? I hear things are looking up for you.
Oh, thank you. Yes, that's correct. My efforts are being rewarded in abundance.
How lovely. I'm proud of you.
As am I of you.
When I first reached Bright Falls last year, I was surprised by how sparse the town felt. Later on, I noticed just how much the citizens gave me to ponder.
The moon and the sun and the circles they run.
The light of the stars, the sky where they fly.
Down below
we flow, below we flow.
This seems like a cult. Time is mentioned, and flow. Are they talking about the dark place?
This is the third time I've requested something be done about the TV in my room. It keeps going on by itself. It's keeping me awake all night.
Yes, sir, I'm terribly sorry for that. We've called a professional electrician. In the meantime, have you tried unplugging the TV for the night?
Oh, there's an idea, Einstein. Why don't I just get rid of everything I'm paying for in that room while I'm at it? Sleep on the floor. Go to the toilet in the corner. Yeah, I'm not unplugging it. You're fixing it.
Of course, sir.
Cynthia revealed to Alan in 2010 that Zane spoke to her through television screens. Alan sees himself through televisions. Televisions are a way of communicating with the dark place. Is this just faulty equipment, or is there more at play? This lady gets more violent as the story progresses. There's a hidden story there. Who is she trying to read?
You remember how it went last time? The sacrifices we made? The pain? It's happening again.
Who is she talking to? What is she referring to? When is she referring to?
We learned from the last time, didn't we? Fought our way through it. Held fast. And now look at us. As thick as thieves. I'm sure whatever is coming is going to be a cakewalk.
But it's not a loop. This is a song. Music like Anger's Remorse can be played from a record. Records play in a spiral motion. This Road is a song that breaks down towards the end. It reminded me of a record. It's a nice touch. That's everything I want to talk about before I start the Night Springs DLC. Is there anything you think I've misunderstood? Do you agree with any of this? Let me know what you think down in the comments below.